So when it comes to technology for this section, the very first thing that you need to be able to do is work with lists. And a list is the way that the calculator can use a set of data all at once rather than individual data items at a single time. And there's an advantage in that because if you are using a single data item at a time and you need to come up with a bunch of calculations based off of that set of data. For instance, let's suppose we have this set of data right here. We want the mean, we want the median, we want the mode. Later on, we might want something called the standard deviation, and so forth. If we just use the individual set of data one at a time, we would have to start off calculating our mean by typing in each data item one by one into the home screen, adding each value together. We'd do that over and over and over until we got all the way to the end, and then divide by the total number of data items. Then when we want to do another calculation, we'd still have to do the exact same thing, plugging everything in one at a time. Long story short, if all you ever do is use this calculator in the home screen for function mode, you've wasted a lot of money. So let me show you how you can take advantage of lists to help out your calculations in a statistics course. So first off, where to find lists. Make sure you write this down so you remember later. Under the stat key, easy to remember, everything pretty much for this first module is right underneath the same key. So stat key, the very first thing that shows up, so this is trying to look like a menu, like in Apple operating system or Windows operating system. And there's certain menu items underneath it. And you can scroll around using your arrow keys to different menus or up and down to different menu items. All right, the very first menu and the first menu item says edit and has three little dots after it. If you press enter, that will take you into what's called the list editor. Now, I have some data already in my list editor. You may or may not. It doesn't really make any difference. We're going to learn how to get around and change things as we need anyway. So supposing that you have some data already in there, you can remove it very easily. You can, first off, move around in the list editor kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. And if you have a piece of data highlighted and you want to get rid of it, you can just hit delete and the editor will take that away. Now, if you have a long list of data and you want to delete the whole thing, well, there's another way you can do this. Instead of just hitting delete over and over again, which would be fine, you can actually scroll all the way up to the name of the list. Just be careful not to hit delete this time, because if you hit delete, what happens is it just removes that list from the list editor altogether. You can put it back. If you hit second and then hit the delete key again, that would insert. And then you can insert, you type in the name of the list, so you want to put L2 back in. It's right back where it was. Alternatively, if you ever get rid of a list and you're just not sure how to get it back, quit out of the list editor, press stat again, and scroll down to setup editor. That will change everything back to the factory defaults. So no matter what you do, you can always get back to where you need. Next, the correct way to clear out everything in the list is to highlight the name of the list, press clear, and then enter. And that will remove everything in your list. So go ahead and do that for any lists that have data already there. Now, the list editor, like I said, works just like a spreadsheet. So you can just type in data here as you see it. So for this particular data set, I'm going to type it all into one single list. There's 6 lists in your calculator by default, but generally you only ever need 1 or possibly 2 if you happen to have frequencies that go along. So just enter your data and be careful not to mistype anything. And let me get that in as quickly as I can here. Okay, now supposing I haven't made any typos, what I'm able to do now that I've entered the list into the calculator. Oh, and in case you didn't see, I was pressing enter after every data item I typed in. Now, in order to do calculations based off of that data, you have first off the list menu, which you can hit second and stat, and there's different things you can do with lists. You can sort them, you can, add them together in different ways, different stuff you can do. Then there's the math menu for lists where you can find minimums, maximums, means, medians, so forth. Lots of different types of calculations. And that's one way to get the mean of a data set. But another way, which is actually pretty convenient because it does a lot of these all at once. You hit second and quit, and then hit stat, but this time scroll over to the calc menu. Then go down, well, you don't have to go anywhere. It's the very first item in most calculators. It's 1VARStats. It stands for single variable statistics. If you just highlight that and press enter, it puts that function on the home screen, but it doesn't execute it yet. It waits for some input. Now, you can not tell it any input, and it will default to whatever you put into L1. But I think it's a better practice to hit second and 1 and tell the calculator that you're working with the list or the data within the list L1. And that's going to make it so that if you ever have data in L2 or L3 perhaps, that you just remember to do that. Regardless, when that's done, press enter, and it will come up with a bunch of calculations for you. And as long as you remember the notation that we set forth in class for our statistics, it will show you everything that you need to know. So for instance, X bar, that stands for a mean. So this is the mean of your data set, 29.67. Sigma with an X, that stands for a sum of your data. So the total of your data items is 356, but you probably won't need that much. Later on, we have the sum of the squares. These are standard deviations, the number of data items, which can be important sometimes. And there's a little down arrow next to the N, indicating that you can scroll down a bit and see some more stuff that is calculated. So it's also got the minimum, the maximum. We'll talk about Q1 and Q3 later on in the class, but for now, MED is the median. So it's come up with the median as well. So here we've got the mean and the median of this data set. So what about the mode? Well, the calculator doesn't do the mode simply because that's really a calculation based off of or reserved for qualitative data, not quantitative data. And this calculator cannot do anything with qualitative data. So it doesn't give that. To find a mode, all you have to do is just kind of scan through and see which one occurs the most. Or you could go into your list operations, sort ascending. So you could sort your list, then go back into your list editor, and that's a good way to determine if a data item occurs more than any other. So without having to scan to find it, I see 12 occurs twice, 29 occurs twice. And so this would be a bimodal data set, and I would just list the mode as 12 and 29. Okay, now that's the basic operation for lists and calculating your basic statistics. Now, what if we have a situation where we would like to calculate a weighted set of statistics? Well, the calculator can do that also, but we have to know how to input it correctly to make sure it does the weighted statistics instead of just basic statistics. So here we have a frequency distribution. And the first step in this process we know is to calculate the midpoints of each of the class ranges. So in my list editor, I would like to put in L1 my midpoints, the individual data items. But I have this data in L1. I'm going to go ahead and clear it out, pressing clear and enter. And now I'm going to start putting in my midpoints. Well, the midpoint of the first class, if we take 0 plus 15 divided by 2, if it was 16 over 2, I would know that would be 8, but maybe I don't know 15 over 2 quite so quickly on top of my head. That's actually okay. watch this. If you don't know, just type in 15 over 2 and it will calculate that for you and then enter the value. So you don't have to worry about calculating ahead of time here. And it's really cool in the next one, 16 and 31, you know you need to add 16 and 31 together first, make sure that's in parentheses, and then divide by 2. There's the midpoint of the next class. And then once you have the first two, you could look at the difference in these midpoints. So for instance, what's 23.5 minus 7.5? All right, so the difference is 16. So basically, if you took 23.5 plus 16, so you're adding the class width. So that's the next midpoint, or you could have calculated it. All right, and then if you take 39.5 plus 16, that would give you the next one. And then finally, 55.5 plus 16 more gives me the last one. All right, likewise, I could have just done 64 plus 79 divided by 2. Either way is fine. Now, L2, what we would like to put there are frequencies. Now, the frequencies are given as is, and we just type those as we see them. Okay, that's that. And lastly, to do weighted statistics, to get a weighted mean, for instance, instead of anything else, what we do is quit out of the list editor after we put the data in. I'm going to clear the home screen just because there's so much on there. Press Stat, go over to Calc again, and we still want one-var stats. Now, that's a good thing because it's not very many things that you have to remember to use in the calculator. But it's also a bad thing because how you use this function makes a difference in how it calculates. So for instance, if all you type in is second and 1 at this point, it will just do regular old statistics of stuff in L1, regardless if you put any data in or not, in L2 that is. To make it use weighted statistics, you have to put a comma after L1 and then hit second and 2 or L2. So this is always one-var stats, midpoints, comma, frequencies. Then press enter, and it will do weighted statistics for you. So here we got 59.90 when we round, or 52.90 when we round. Now, there's one catch to this, and it's a good habit to check the number of values used in the calculation. So here it says the number of values used was 246. So if you add these numbers together, it should be in the ballpark of around 250. Doesn't matter if it's exactly equal, you're just making sure it's in the ballpark. Because here's the thing. If you had not used the L1, L2, it would still do the data in L1. The mean there is reported as 39.5. That's the mean of your midpoints. But there were only 5 pieces of data used in that calculation. The lowest frequency is 6, so 5 is not nearly enough. So that's kind of your only little way of determining if you've made a mistake or not. So, hope that helps. Have a good day.